All right, it says we're live. For those watching the recording, hang on for a minute while we do some basic housekeeping. Need to post some links. Then we'll do a round of introductions, and then we'll get into the agenda. Okay, got the link to the YouTube Live, posting that in the YouTube Live. Posting that in our Telegram channel. And as always, guys, help me keep an eye on the YouTube comments. I usually don't look at those. Let's see. Right on. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the Permissionless Software Foundation Technical Steering Committee. Today is July 6th, 2022. I am Chris Troutner. Let's go around and do some quick introductions. Let's start with you, Aaron Sunman.
Greetings, Aaron Sunman here. Big fan of the Permissionless Software Foundation. I feel like this is one of those, and I've probably said this in every introduction, an amazing, important part of humanity to have the self-sovereign individual start to come alive, protection from the state. And I feel like if it's not permissionless, it's not going to work. So building software that's permissionless allows this to happen is fantastic, and I'm proud to be a part of it. And also shout out to David, who's watching on YouTube.
Awesome. Go ahead, Sam.
Hi, my name's Sam, and I am a PSF supporter, and I'm here for peer-to-peer cache for the world. I'm a peer-to-peer cache maximalist, and yeah, I think that's it for now.
And you run some Web3 infrastructure. I was just testing that yesterday. Like mine fall over, and I always oh well, Sam's is up and running.
Oh yeah, I haven't monitored it, or I haven't been checking it, but I'm assuming it's still like.
I tested it yesterday. It's running great.
Oh, that's cool.
Go ahead, Stoyan.
My name is Stoyan Zhekov, and I helped with the support for the JavaScript libraries for PSF.
And appreciate you joining this. Staying up so late over there in Japan. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen, and we'll get to the agenda here. So as always, our agendas are posted on GitHub under the Permissionless Software Foundation GitHub group under a repository called TSC for Technical Steering Committee. They're filed as issues. So you got to go to that issues tab, and then they're dated. So the scope of the meeting, there's some helpful links at the top here, like the Zoom meeting link, the YouTube channel, the sort of rules for joining is in this pre-meeting checklist. The scope of what we talk about is some of the software listed here. There's a more exhaustive list at cachestack.info. And so yeah, let's jump on into it. Give a quick update on the token DEX. So just as a refresher, the Permissionless Software Foundation was given a grant last year by Ava Labs to take our DEX prototype at that time and bring it over to the Avalanche X chain. And the eCache GNC also matched that grant so that they could have a similar DEX on the eCache chain. And so since Avalanche was first, they are getting the software first. So I'm in the process of wrapping that up. Got a couple links to a couple repositories here, Avex DEX UI. I'm rethinking the UI because on the Avalanche side, this is going to have to be a multi-chain wallet. So it's going to have a little bit of Bitcoin Cash and PSF tokens, because the pay-to-write database, which is at the core of the DEX, right now only exists on Bitcoin Cash. And someday I hope to have it exist on multiple chains, but that's where it's at right now. So that's why the Avalanche DEX wallet's going to have to be a multi-chain wallet. So it'll handle both Avalanche and Avalanche tokens, as well as Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Cash tokens. Anyway, so if anybody wants to get a sneak peek at what the user interface is going to look like there, I'm basically rewriting it. I'm reusing huge chunks of code from the other wallets, but since I'm using this as an opportunity to basically brush up on my React skills and build some React apps. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. But after we get the decks up and running on Avalanche and wrap up that grant, then the BCH decks, which is fully functional at this point, it still needs some improvement. It's functional, but it still needs a lot of UX improvement. That's going to be a pretty simple fork to get it over to the eCache chain. So I'll focus on that afterwards, or after the Avalanche Dex is up and running. And then after that, after we've met our sort of grant obligations, the very next thing I'm very excited to do is build this buy now button, which we've discussed in previous meetings. That'll let anybody sell any token on the Dex. So I want to build it so that I can sell my own NFTs and just have a nice buy now button. But one of the sort of prototype, or what would that, like a boilerplate that I'm going to create, would let people sell USDT, the one stable SLP stable coin, so that you can sell, buy, essentially make it really as easy as possible to buy stable coins using the DEX protocol. And as always, guys, if you have any questions or comments, jump in and interrupt me. Otherwise, we'll just get through this and we'll get to the roundtable. So I talked about sort of rewriting the user interface using React. So I created this repository called React Bootstrap Web 3 SPA. So SPA stands for Single Page App, and it leverages our Web 3 infrastructure. Let me sort of show you guys what that's looking like. Here in the repository, there's a link to a live demo on Filecoin. And I'll give that a minute to come up. But it's based on Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is an HTML and CSS template. It's mobile first. So basically what this lets me do is I can just focus on the utility, the JavaScript, and making things do what I want it to do. And I don't have to spend much time thinking about how it looks or how it's going to look on a desktop versus a phone. That's what Bootstrap does for me. They've got that all figured out. I don't have to think about it. All I have to focus on is just like putting boxes together. And then the Bootstrap framework will make sure that it all looks pretty on a phone. Oh, it looks like this thing's still coming up.
Chris, maybe you can take a look on Material UI.
Yeah, I have. It's been a couple years since I've looked at it, but
yeah, because Bootstrap is just like intelligent CSS, but Material UI will give you the ready components, like React components. So you can even more, concentrate more on the payment part. You can have like ready, like drop down boxes and everything.
Yeah, wasn't that for building? I thought it was like for basically CSS and JavaScript. It was for like styling, but using JavaScript. Or am I off base about that?
Also have ready components, which you can use inside your React code.
Okay, I'll have to give that another look. It's been a while since I've looked at it. So basically, go ahead, Sam.
I've been hearing a lot of people talk about a Tailwind for CSS, and like you could probably look at that too. Like it makes the using the UI components a lot easier too. Kind of like Bootstrap, but it's like a modern tool.
Okay, that's good to know. I need to check into both of these. Bootstrap was just something I learned about years ago. I haven't really touched this front end stuff in a long time. And I noticed that they had a React Bootstrap. So they took all the Bootstrap and they basically wrapped it with React. So everything that Bootstrap offers is now available as a React component. So that's largely what we're seeing here. But what you can see is when it comes up, it loads the wallet library, and then it initializes the wallet. So that means it's going out to it's initializing minimal SLP wallets, and it's leveraging our Web3 infrastructure. By default, it uses free bch.fullstack.cache, but then there's this drop-down box And so you can, if for some reason that's down, you can select one of these redundant backends. So this is all a boilerplate. This is intended for people to fork and then start from here. And so I just instituted this drop-down menu and the sort of the ability to switch between different views by selecting things in the menu. So it's just a boilerplate. And then I also forked it and created this -Android fork, which has the capacitor framework, which lets you compile that into a native Android app. So it has all the hooks for that. And so this is a great way to, we managed to do all this with wallet.fullstack.cache, but it was sort of after the fact. And as I started to dig into that code base and customize it for Avalanche, I realized like, if we had been able to start from scratch with a clean start and get it into capacitor so that we could generate the Android app and like did that from day one and then added all the functionality we needed on top, that would actually have been a better way to do it. So this is kind of, I'm sort of taking that as far as I can take it as long as it's sort of efficient and cost effective. But anyway, so if anybody's interested, there's this boilerplate here. You can do very simple, like the example there's check a balance, but this is the same template I'm using for like my NFT display. And then the capacitor framework is a pretty simple, you just pull your code into this Android fork. And if anybody actually wants to install Android Studio and go through the capacitor documentation, is pretty simple, but if you need any handholding, I'm happy to help. But yeah, the idea here is just to start from a simple boilerplate, and then as I add features, ensure that everything can be compiled into Android and keep everything in sync like that. Okay, big update on the PayToWrite database. It's been updated to look at a token. And so, Sam, I think you're the only one that might be running a PayToWrite database instance. You'll want to pull in the changes and rebuild. What it does now is when it starts up, it pulls down the mutable data for this token, and I've actually got that here. And so in the mutable data of the token is this price history. And so this sets the cost of 1 penny's worth of PSF tokens. So, on 6/24, it was 0.133 PSF tokens was equivalent to 1 penny in US dollars. And so the idea is that this token, the ability to update this token, will be passed on to the Minting Council. And so every 3 months, the Minting Council will meet to update keys. And as part of that process, they'll also update this price lookup. And so this allows us to peg the write cost, or the cost of writing to the database, to US dollars rather than natively pegging to 0.01 PSF tokens, whatever that happens to be in fiat. That's what it was before. So I like this because we're going to get the PSF as an organization. It's much more easy to reason about cash flows. So as we get more writes, every write is a penny, and that's our cash flow. That's our operating, cash flow. And it's a way of sort of pegging the token to the dollar, or at least as far as the PayToWrite database is concerned, in a decentralized way that's tamper resistant, especially once this sort of update baton gets passed to the Minting Council. It'll be part of a multi-sig operation.
I love to see how you're actually using something like the idea of mutable data, which has not been something that's really been presented to most people, even anywhere in the Web3 space. I feel like this is an interesting concept, but using it in a way that allows for something to be used, to add value to a whole ecosystem. So well done. I think this is great.
Cheers. Thanks. And then as part of, while I was doing this, so I felt like I needed to do this now because I'm going to be leveraging this work as I wrap up the Avalanche decks, because it's going to talk to the PayToWrite database. And so as part of this, I took the time to increase the test coverage. So the PayToWrite database is almost at 100% test coverage. It's like 99.8 or something like that. There's like 3 lines I was having a hard time getting included in the tests. So I always like it when I get a project to 100% test coverage. I really feel like, okay, this can sit now and I can go work on something else. And I know that like if I get a drive-by pull request, and I have a high degree of confidence when I merge it in.
Awesome.
And that's pretty much the agenda. It's pretty much just full speed ahead on the decks. It's trying to wrap up those grants. That's the main focus for me right now. So I want to open it up to the roundtable discussion. Aaron, you were talking. You had mentioned something about wanting to discuss your NFT exchange project. So you want to sort of tell us what that's all about?
Yeah. Hey. So hello, everybody. Is it possible for you to share a screen as well?
Yeah. Let me enable that. Okay. You should be good now.
Okay. So I was just going to show it's not done yet, and there's lots to do on it. But the idea is I'm building out I'm an NFT exchange for SLP NFTs, right? So on Bitcoin Cash now, and it's going to take a long time really to get some of it, but I wanted to kind of come back with some of this idea of how do we help the PSF grow, and how do we monetize some of this, and I'm not taking as granted that you actually want me to do this. So I'm sort of asking you today too, is to say, hey, is this okay? Is this something that we would consider to be a useful thing for the PSF as a token ecosystem? So the idea is when someone logs into this, right? So right now it's not done clearly. I don't have a lot of things done, but I do have a login process, and I have this where it goes out and looks at how many, looks at my I'm using the PSF BCH wallet. Nice. So each person gets their own wallet, and it respects SLP tokens, NFTs, BCH. And so what it did is it just queried for 2 things: the amount of BCH, which I have 7 cents, talking big money here, and then we have like $1.52 worth of PSF. And so I'm doing a query every 20 minutes right now against the cost of that, and just so I have a quote system going on, and then the ability to just be able to create an NFT and put it up for sale. So this is clearly not done yet, but the idea also is to make sure that the individual, when something is sold, I'm going to stop sharing now because it's not that exciting.
It looks good.
The idea is to have something where when something is sold, the individual receives 85% of the fund for selling that. Some percentage of it gets paid back to them, to the creator, in PSF tokens. So I would slice out 2% and pay them PSF tokens. The idea being, it would be done automatically, and they can use that as a mechanism to pay for things going forward, or they can move it out of their wallet. But just getting more people holding it, as well as it becoming a part of an ecosystem that is I would like to be able to say all of the stuff, the ponies that were created for SLP NFTs, the reapers, all of those can be brought in here and sold on here. So it wouldn't be just stuff that's created here, but it'd be trying to use every bit of those that have been created and used in the past, and being able to have like the sphere. I don't know, Into the Sphere. I don't know if you've seen that game or played that game, but he uses SLP NFTs to be able to run all that. And so I'd like all of these things to work out here and to integrate the PSF token as a part of that ecosystem. So general discussion here. Is there negatives to that? Is it positives to that? What's your take? Is anyone completely against it, first of all?
No, I think it's great. I think it looks great. I think the idea is great. What I also think is great is that it's not me doing this. I'm glad that somebody else is doing this. And so we're in this lull with the NFTs right now, with the carnage that's going on in Smart BCH. It's unclear if all of this migration to Smart BCH is going to continue, or if there's going to be people are going to come back to SLP. Like Enter the Sphere is a perfect example. I think they have the wheels in motion to actually move to a different blockchain. But I'm ramping up my NFTs. I've got a couple artists sort of waiting in the wings who want to leverage our NFTs with mutable data to start launching art. And then I'm working with launchpadip.com to create a system for basically capturing intellectual property as an NFT and then being able to sell that.
Right.
And so, yeah, I love what you're building, and I think it definitely is going to add a lot of utility.
I'm glad to hear that you've got all of that going on as well, because I feel like I realize there's a lot of people that have left SLP. Even the guy who wrote Jungle.net, I don't know, Freeman, I think. I mean, it looks as though a lot of that is been abandoned. Not necessarily that project, but others. But we're still in a spot where people, even like Andreessen Horowitz partners, have a hard time explaining Web3 to people in the media. Mm-hmm. And the funny part is, I'm like, Chris Dixon, all he had to say back to the person was, yeah, but if you sell the PDF, they can just keep copying and copying over and over again. The NFT cannot be copied. It is sold to the individual. And he didn't actually say that. So even the best people have a hard time explaining this, which means this is still nascent. It's still new. And it doesn't matter if it's on Smart BCH, Ethereum, or whatever else. This is still coming, and it will be big.
I'm very glad that you are developing this. This is totally needed. I think that the SLP token itself is a gateway towards the decentralized metaverse, and because it is so much cheaper, therefore it is easier for game creators to create using the SLP token. But I've been saying for a while, what we need is a marketplace, some place where you can display it, and now you're doing that. That's awesome. You may want to look at 3JS and Babylon.js as integrations so that you can properly display 3D assets. And there are different ones, like I think 3JS and Babylon.js both have they have some different players, so you have to look at them, but they'll load in GLBs, they can load up GLTIFs. I don't know if anybody's using USDs yet, but having that would be great for display, and really would take it to the next level. Because that, as a creator, that's one of the things I find that's an issue, is that there'll be a lot of NFT stuff, but nobody's looking at supporting the 3D NFTs, which are the future, of integration and interoperable gaming and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I agree. There's an interesting side to that too. I've mentioned this before, but usually my brothers I have 4 older brothers, and they all live across the United States. We get together on Saturday mornings and play golf together on the Oculus Rift, on the Oculus Quest 2. We actually play walkabout golf. We actually have an hour just hanging out, playing golf together, and they're all over the country, and they could be anywhere in the world. But this idea that this 3D space is still new, but it is coming, and it doesn't matter like what it looks like right now. I don't know how old all of you are, but I remember when the first Sound Blaster card could play 2 sounds simultaneously, and I thought that was amazing. Now I got a phone right here that can play 8 tracks simultaneously, and so just because it's not big yet doesn't mean it won't be. So Shoemaker, I'll definitely have more questions for you about that, but I feel like that you're right. I definitely need to start working on that as well.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, this really ties into something you and I were talking about, Chris, I think last week with the IPFS cluster network. I mean, now here's a place for them to write. And maybe we can take this to another point after Chris says what he wants to say. But we were talking about utilizing the pay to write database as a pseudo type of private right, and then the cluster as a private or a public network, writable network, and utilizing SLP tokens as a way to write to the private network and tell the public network what to pin. So that was another thing, which kind of goes hand in hand with what you're talking about with an NFT whole creation. So now we're using the PSF token in multiple ways. Not only are you using it for the for the NFTs, but you could be using it to pin the data that's associated with your NFTs, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I love seeing the PSF token as a payment method. That's something we need to, I mean, that's something I plan to grow. Like one of the things I hope we can get to probably next year is building a bridge between USDC on the Avalanche chain and the PSF token. We'll probably end up building, once we launch the Avalanche DEX, we'll also simultaneously launch a PSF token on X chain and a bridge between PSF on BCH and X chain. So being able to exchange the PSF token for different things, I mean, using it to pay to write, but I love that you got this NFT sale, a way to sell NFTs, because one of the things I'm working on with Launchpad is enabling downloads. So the workflow here is that like an artist doesn't want to put out the high res image, they want to put out just like the token icon. And so they would create an NFT that represents the high res stuff. That's what you're actually buying. And so you would buy this NFT, which is just the low res image on an exchange like what you're building, and then bring it back to Launchpad to exchange it. You would burn it to get the actual high resolution artwork that you're trying to buy, or this applies to any kind of intellectual property, but basically using tokens as a key that unlocks the download for the actual intellectual property. So it's a service. It's a very hard thing to do in a decentralized way, which is why Launchpad's building it. And so it would, and what we don't have is the secondary market. Like we're building the infrastructure to take for a creator to create a token, send it out to a secondary market, a user to acquire that token somewhere in the secondary market, bring it back and burn it to unlock the download.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow, that's a great example of something that has not been done before in a decentralized fashion. That's really amazing.
Yeah, but we're just sort of building this with the assumption that there will be a secondary market, even though there isn't one right now. So I mean, we've got the BCH DEX, which is very clunky steps in that direction, but we need a lot of different ways to sell and trade NFTs.
So one of the other things that's happening that built into the PSF BCH wallet is this ability that when money moves, the PSF automatically gets 2,000 Satoshis, which I think is great. So we're trying to support, or I'm with the ownrare.art site, I'm trying to support it in two different ways. One is to support the usage of the PSF, but also make sure that as any money moves around, it automatically there'll be little chips of it get sent to the PSF to support continued development.
Yeah, so it's not that you need to pay for the infrastructure. It's that you need to increase usage of your app that will naturally pay for the infrastructure that you depend on and your users depend on.
Excellent.
Yeah,
that's all I have to say. I'm working on the economics of it. So if there's if anyone has any questions or anything, or Sam or Stoyan, if you guys had anything to say specifically, that'd be great to hear as well.
That is so awesome.
What's the primary the NFTs themselves? Are they like mostly geared towards like artwork or?
I think in the beginning it would be probably artwork. I'm just trying to keep it really simple in the beginning and then add functionality. But part of this is this idea of, well, once you get to the idea of immutable and mutable data associated, I think there's a whole bunch more functionality that can come out of it. And it's difficult to see it right now. But the stuff that Chris is doing with the pay-to-write database, where you actually have something go out and query IPF, grab that file, that's an example of something that says, okay, it can do a lot more, but I don't know where it goes next.
Right. I was watching the cash tokens proposal yesterday, and there were a lot of I guess I was looking at all use cases for tokens, and one of the things was that it should, according to the proposal, the creator, he said it should be easy to migrate SLP over to, but I guess we'll see when it comes out. So.
Yeah, I was just thinking they want to migrate SLP into smart BCH tokens. Is that what they were?
No. This is a cash token. This is a different proposal.
Oh, then
this is supposed to be in the UTXO itself. I believe it's you. Yeah. So I guess the token itself is supposed to be a native, so it's like miner validated.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Miner validated. That is something that is really big. But they talked about how it will be easy to transfer. I've not read too much on it.
I've been trying to follow this. I mean, the proposal's been out there for a while, and in fact, there was 2 separate proposals, and then they merged together, and then they separated again, and then they merged together again, and then supposedly it's going to go into the upgrade in May next year. Take all of this with a grain of salt. It's all vaporware at this point, and so that's the attitude I'm taking. It's like I'll believe it when I see it. Because there's a big gap between ideas and reality, and that gap is called execution. And so we'll just see if they're able to execute. There's a lot of good ideas, and I see very little in the way of execution. But the BCHN team is pretty good about that execution, and in particular, Jonathan Silverblood's great at sort of taking these ideas and bringing them into reality, and he seems to be putting his focus on this one. So I think it actually has a pretty high probability of at least achieving some level of reality. My attitude on this is like, SLP tokens are here, they exist, we have infrastructure, we can use them today. Whatever happens tomorrow is tomorrow, and if it's great and there's a migration path, all the better. So I mean, obviously SLP tokens, it's a trade-off. They're simple, and there's a lot of downfalls with that simplicity. So if they can create a more expressive, more native, token protocol that's miner validated, non-chain, and can interact with the AnyHedge, protocol, and all these wonderful ideas, I hope it exists, but I'm too busy dealing with reality. So I'm just cautiously optimistic and trying to follow it, but it is good stuff, and I don't want to poo-poo on it. But I mean, Bitcoin Cash has been talking about tokens literally since the very beginning of Bitcoin Cash, since 2017. So I hope they pull it off. I mean, SLP was really sort of born out of the frustration of lack of progress on that front. So we'll see.
Yeah, makes sense.
I had some thoughts on the DEX. It was too short demonstration, but for me it looks too much Web 2. I think maybe you need to change, for example, around the usernames and passwords, because you need database for this, but maybe it will be better just to connect wallet. And in this case, yeah, it's same like authentication. Other thing, maybe web interface is one of the last thing. You need a lot of infrastructure below, Aaron was mentioned. When you try to have for example, NFTs in some wallet, you need to show all of the media. And if you don't have a pinning service which belongs to you, which will get all of these images, now most of these Ethereum compatible blockchains, they have this the graph stuff, which is like a huge indexer, which is getting all of the data and making a database from this. So they're quick, but you need to have something like this one, way to somehow to cache graphical or other data close, so they will be displayed more quickly. Also, maybe it will be good to have an API before the UI, because front end, they can stop it very easy. And so it's URLs and stuff like this one. But if you have something like API, everybody can create UI somewhere on files everywhere and just access this service. So I think maybe first priority should be not web interface, but API, which you can sell your tokens there. And it can be this service that now we are creating, this DEX. So yeah, it's, I think more important is back story.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree with any of that, because I feel especially the ability to, because clearly this has to be custodial if I'm holding the wallet, right? If I'm not, so there is issues with what I'm doing. And I think you're absolutely right. Caching this and having all of this data is not going to be a simple thing. So you're right, and I'm definitely looking at all of what you're talking about. And
well, let me counterbalance that opinion, because I really like the way you've approached this, Aaron, in that you're much more comfortable with PHP than you are with JavaScript. So you can make those sort of API calls between the front end and the back end. And so you're leveraging the command line wallet so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can just issue command line instructions with your PHP, and then let the PSF CLI wallet or SLP wallet handle it. So I really like that approach. And then same with the front end. You use the template, and you're just sort of taking the very conventional Web 2 approach. So at the end of the day, the end user doesn't care what's going on under the hood. It either works or it doesn't. It's a fairly binary thing. It either looks good or it doesn't. It either works or it doesn't. So that's where I get hung up. So I love that there's someone else in this group who's just sort of giving the users what they want, which is make it work and make it look good.
That was my first push, to say I don't want the person to have to know anything. Just be able to come here and do it, and get, if they want it. But I know that there's a lot of parts that I already feel like it's not the Web3 ethos, and so there's parts that I'm conflicted about as well. So I just want to get something running, because otherwise I'll never get shit done. I'll get nothing happening. So that's the first bit.
Yeah, well, as a group, we're tackling this. I'll worry about making sure that we're honest, and we have a path forward with the decentralized Web3 stuff. So I love that you can counterbalance that force with I'm just going to build something that looks good and works, well, and then eventually we'll meet in the middle.
As I get the cluster network set up, you could even integrate that into your website, or you want to upload an NFT, some art or something like that. Then you can say how many times you want it pinned, where do you want it pinned, and these are things that we're trying to solve with the cluster network that don't exist right now for somebody to be able to use in a pinning service today.
Well, I would love that, because I feel like one of the big things is anything that gets created shouldn't rely on my site to work. It should be, it should exist as a token, and then all the content should be on IPFS. I mean, not immediately, because I don't figure all that shit out yet, but I agree. It needs to work the way you're talking about and be decentralized from the ownership perspective and the usage perspective.
Well, and Chris, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the idea where we were having with the pay-to-write database and the cluster, and using both of those as for people to be able to pin data that way.
Yeah, well, let's just recap on that, just so you and I are on the same page and everybody else can. So Aaron and I had a conversation about. So Aaron's doing work with IPFS cluster, and so that's the ability of several IPFS nodes to coordinate to pin the same content, and he's trying to essentially do like a CDN type stuff where your geographic location might determine what IPFS nodes your node connects to in order to have better performance. And then we were talking about, well, how could we, and there's, so the IPFS cluster is its own software project separate from IPFS. It's just basically, it's similar in many ways to the IPFS chord library that I wrote, where it's essentially a blob of software that you bolt onto an IPFS node. And now you can coordinate this cluster. Whereas IPFS chord is the same thing, but it's more about communication rather than pinning files. That's really the main difference between the two. Well, and so we've got the pay-to-write database, which is in many ways an IPFS cluster, because what you're doing is you're coordinating the pinning of content, and that's essentially what the pay-to-write database is. Every instance maintains its own copy of the database, and that data is available over IPFS. Now, one obstacle right now is that the pay-to-write database is on a private IPFS network. It's not on the public IPFS network. So Aaron and I were discussing different ways to sort of bridge that gap. And so one way would be keep the pay-to-write database private and use like an SLP, use the mutable data of an SLP token to somehow sort of hop the fence there. Or, you know, but honestly, so Aaron, what I really actually want to try, Aaron, is I'd like to get the pay to write database out of the IPFS private network. What I plan to do is set up.
That'd be great, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's ultimately, like, as far as a goal, like that should be our goal. Like I said during our discussion, moving everything over to a private IPFS network was sort of an act of desperation, just to sort of limit the influences that were sort of, there were so many problems going on. I couldn't figure out like how to attribute the different things and how to separate them. So now that we've had it in a private network and IPFS Court has been super stable for the last few months, I think it's time to start trying to build that back out on the public network. And so that would solve a lot of, because yeah, I mean, we're going to constantly fight this problem of trying to get data back and forth. And I would love it if we had if we had the pay to write database on the public network, then people can access individual rights in the database just over IPFS. They don't need to know or care about the pay to write database.
Yeah, for those who don't understand what Chris is saying, you need a gateway to access anything that's on a private network. Therefore, you're always going to induce some amount of latency if you're having to jump through gateways. And whereas if it's public, you can just connect automatically from node to node, and therefore you can increase your speed. In fact, you could connect directly. So like when people are downloading the cache deck software, and Chris says, you know, IPFS Swarm Connect to the 3 IPFS IDs he's got, you're directly connecting to those 3 machines, thus speeding up your download. You know, so, but right now, because it is a private network, you got to go through gateways, and we were talking about ways to leverage the private network and the public network, and utilizing both of them, and perhaps utilizing the PSF token as a way for people to pay. Say, I want you to pin this content ID, and then be able to say, I want it pinned 10 times in these 10 regions, you know. And since it's pretty much that infrastructure is very close to being there within the PSF community. A lot more so than, say, me having to write it or hire somebody to write it from the ground up.
Yeah, so there's this payments option. So it's like if we're just a club and we're all friends and we all know one another, we don't need to think about payments or scaling. But if we're to any sort of, because there is no payment mechanism sort of in the IPFS cluster, right, Aaron?
No, we were talking about like if you're, you know, I think we left off saying bounties to run pay to write databases. And at first, you know, our cold start for the hard side is free pinning for those who run nodes at first, but eventually having bounties for people that run the nodes. So like, and eventually you get to a spot where, yes, you earn, and what's good is, okay, maybe you earn some PSF tokens. You can go use those for pinning. You can sell them on the decks. Now you can buy NFTs with them on Aaron Cool Cleaner's site. You know, so it's really a win-win if we do end up doing it this way, because the utility of the PSF token is just going to increase with all these projects.
Right.
Therefore, it's real easy for me to run a Raspberry Pi and a hard drive and just earn PSF tokens by having a node that participates in this. And now I can use those for my decks, or I can use that to create tokens, or I can use that to for Aaron's NFT decks, you know. So
yeah, so there's 2 ways to skin this cat. There's we could do bounties like we have set up for the other PSF infrastructure, where we just pay people to run these instances and pin data as it comes in. There's also like, so this is where the the pay to write database comes in addition. So if you wanted to pin a piece of content in the cluster, one way that we could do that is you would put the CID that you want pinned into a pay to write database entry, and then all these nodes that are listening for that would see that and pin the content. And along with that data, you could include other data like proof of burn. So we could say like, okay, we're going to charge 1 penny per megabyte, and so what the consensus rules would be okay, this new pay to write database entry came in, it's for our cluster. Here's the CID I want to pin. I'm going to go get it, and I'm going to check how big it is and check that against the proof of burn to make sure they paid enough. And then if that all checks, then I will pin the content. So one is sort of the PSF as an organization can incentivize this through bounties, or the individual users can pay, like, pay to play sort of things. And we can do both. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like we're getting nodes distributed one by one to people, and it's literally Adam going to their house, setting up ports, forwarding on their routers, setting up the machines, and okay, now we got IPFS 6 up, and we're slowly getting to where we have all 15 machines set up, and we can coordinate them correctly and start running tests. But after that point, like you said, I think it's about finding the proper incentivization mechanism. I do like the idea of using the PSF token for pinning of content or in bounties, both, because I think they're going to give utility to the PSF token, added utility, because it's already being used for the DEX. So people are going to want to acquire it. Well, here's another way to acquire it. I could go on the DEX and I could trade for it, or I could run a cluster node and I could earn it, through a bounty or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is another way to earn PSF tokens and then be able to utilize them for the projects that seem to be cohesively standing up all at the same time. I had no idea that Aaron was working on the NFT thing, which just really goes hand in hand with the IPFS cluster thing, because you need some place to store this data, and IPFS cluster makes a lot of sense for that. And then when you take the pay to write database, I do like the idea of like, okay, pay to write database is about being lean and mean. It's about kilobytes of storage, and it's probably best used to reference other data locations, right? So it's getting it fast, being lean, being mean, doesn't take a lot to use it. So, and then the cluster can be about storing larger forms of data, right? And so you can keep those separate. They're not necessarily, the cluster is not going to get so big that it bogs down the original functionality of the pay to write database, and vice versa. All things to talk about once we get the cluster stood up and testing, but I think that having them separate is going to we're going to find benefits to having, whether it's taken off the private network, which would be fine, but having it so that the pay to write database, this is what the pay to write database does, this is what it does extremely well. And, then the cluster, which is like, all right, I'm not going to sit there and upload a 50 gigabyte movie to the pay to write database, but I might pin that to the cluster for use in video collaboration, right? So like those are different use cases.
Yeah. I just want to, Jerry, thanks for sharing this. He raised an interesting idea of an attack. So I think most of us in this group are old enough to remember back in the day when you would get an email and there'd be images in the email. A really common tactic was that even if there were no images, they would include at least a 1 pixel image that like the humans wouldn't even notice. But when you open the email, it would make a call to a server to get that image, and they would be able to track the open rates. So it's like, let's say they sent out 1,000 emails, they'd be able to see that like 10% of them were opened because 10% of them made a call to get this 1 pixel image. And it's so small that it didn't have any drag on performance. So Jerry was just pointing out an article about how this is being done now with NFTs. And this is, again, like one more danger of having the image that represents an NFT be a location-based address rather than a content-based address on IPFS, is they can actually see the IP address of the person who is at least accessing the NFT, if not owning it. They could there's probably enough information there that you could, if you just pick the one that accesses it the most, that's probably the owner of the NFT. So that now you can link an IP address with the ownership of an NFT. Kind of a sneaky little attack. And again, this just emphasizes the one more reason why you should be using IPFS to store NFT content and not centralized URLs.
Right. Excellent. Thanks for sharing, Jerry. That makes you think.
I was wondering. I wanted to ask about your idea of the buy now button is that for the DEX? I've been thinking about the user experience and basically, like, are you looking to make something like a desktop application, sort of like how like LimeWire used to be, where a user just clicks a button and the app just spins up and the marketplace is there?
Well, I covered this a little bit in our last meeting. So right now, the DEX is based on the idea that both buyers and sellers run all of these Docker containers, and it's just way too high of an ask for like the casual consumer. So the idea there is add a level of abstraction by creating a REST API, so the typical Web 2 backend that most websites would have, that can negotiate the DEX protocol and negotiate the purchase of a token. So the idea was, so let's say I want to sell stable coins, but I'm in the US and there's laws against that. So I can't just trade them. However, what I could do is set up this website that can list all the USDH on the DEX with a buy now button and allow you as the user to buy that thing. I don't know, legally, I don't know if this is kosher or not, but the idea is that it is really solving the problem of how do you just have a buy now button where the user can just click the button, get a QR code, pay some BCH, and then they either get their token or they don't, the NFT, or they don't. And so what's happening behind the scenes there is the REST API would be taking that money, negotiating the sale through the DEX protocol. And then after like 10 minutes, either there's that acceptance phase. So there's the offer, the counter offer, and the acceptance in a DEX sale. So the seller has to be on, or their computer has to be online in order to see the counter offer come through and finalize the transaction by generating the acceptance and broadcasting the acceptance transaction. And so that either happens or it doesn't. And so the idea is like that REST API would take the money and hold it. And after 10 minutes, if the acceptance transaction has been broadcasted, it doesn't need to do anything. And if it hasn't, it'll just send the money back. So you're introducing an element of trust in that you're trusting the REST API in order to get a better user experience where the user doesn't really need to know anything about the technology. They just hit a button, pay some money, and then within 10 minutes, they either get their money back or they get the token that they wanted to buy. So that's the basic idea there. Well, I was going to do a couple, I was going to talk a little bit more about this idea of a debt of the Craigslist clone idea. I had a few more thoughts on that. But I also just wanted to, before we dive into that, I wanted to point out that Balaji Srinivasan released this book called The Network State. It went live on July 4th, and I had pre-ordered it. And in the agenda, there's actually a link there to his website, 1729.com. And I think the whole book is online at that website, 1729.com.
Yeah, you
And,
can just download it as an ebook from there. But
yeah. Anyways, I think it's so a lot of people in the crypto space, they talk about The Sovereign Individual, this book that was written in the 90s, how it was very forward thinking. And then, we've talked about other books like The Cold Start Problem recently, which is all about how do you generate network effects. And there's Working in Public by Nadia Ekbal, which is how do you manage open source communities. I think this is another sort of book in the caliber of books that apply directly to what we're trying to do here at the PSF. In his book, the Nation State, he's been writing on this topic for a couple years now, but it's this idea of the intersection between social media and nation states, of how, like, there aren't very many nation states that are more than, say, 10 million people. Or there's a significant number of nation states that have a population less than 10 million. And there are many social media, social media networks that are bigger than 10 million. I mean, you could pick any number, but there clearly exists, in terms of just population numbers, there clearly exists an overlap. And so the book sort of theorizes like what we're going to see in the future in terms of how these sort of social networks could grow to contend with nation states, and why an individual might choose to join one or not. And so it's just a very, very interesting idea. In his outline, he talks about sort of the stepping stones of going from, first is the social media, which is just a group like us, just a group of people who meet once in a while with a common interest. And then the next step is unionization. And I think that's where we're at right now, is creating a token-based economy, having like an economic and like utilitarian purpose, building software, generating a cash flow as a group, and an economy as a group, and then sort of going from there and formalizing it with law and enforcement. And it's a very interesting intellectual exercise, even if not all that resonates with you. He's probably, I definitely count Balaji as one of the top 10 smartest people alive today.
I agree. Fantastic, and I love his work. So I'm with you on that. And funny thing, because I bought some of the LLM SLP tokens for Liberland. I don't know if anybody else owns any of those, but
I think I helped create those tokens. Yeah, that was an interesting experiment, and it's still ongoing. I mean,
yeah, I'll definitely read that book too. I think that's one of those. I think you've mentioned the cold start problem as well as this one, and I think that'd be good for all of us to understand, at least those that are minded that way.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, if there's no more discussion on that, let me just share real quick some of these thoughts I've had around this idea of cloning Craigslist. So we talked about this a little bit in the last meeting, and I was introducing the idea of conceptualizing a store as an NFT, and we sort of got into the pros and cons of why should it be an NFT or should it not be an NFT? Like why this or why that? We kind of walked through some of the logic there. And another one of the things that we discussed was this article that we had shared in our Telegram channel about soulbound tokens. And there's this really thought-provoking article about when is it appropriate to make something represented as a token and not as a token. And sort of the gist of that article was that claims should not be tokens. And a claim is like a certificate, like you pass some educational thing, and so like you're getting a sort of a badge, and that really should probably not be. The article argued that should not be a token. It should be a like a transaction on the blockchain that's immutable and permanent and signed by a one signature, but not necessarily a token. So a lot of nuance and subtlety there. And that really got my gears turning of like, okay, if a store is an NFT and its products are probably entries in the PagerDuty database that the mutable data of the store token points to, how do you like how does a customer leave feedback? Or if they're not safe for work, how does someone sort of mark it and say, hey, this is not safe for work? And so those are examples of claims, like reviews and compliments and complaints. Those are ideas of claims. So just sort of following what this is all leading up to is I think what I'm going to do is create a specification for this stuff, and then I'll create an indexer for a lot of this stuff. So this is sort of where my head's at, is I might fork the PSF SLP indexer. And so like, say the ticker of the NFT needs to follow a certain pattern to identify it as a store. So that way this new indexer can sort of ignore all SLP tokens except for the ones that represent stores. And then these claims, these would be more like, you could burn PSF tokens. So you could take a UTXO that represents a quantity of PSF tokens and then burn them by not attaching the proper op-return to it. But in place of it, you could put other op-return data that the indexer could pick up on. And so that would be one way of implementing a claim. So it would be on the blockchain. And so a claim would be about either a store or another claim. So this is how you could leave reviews of a store, or if say it was a negative review and the store owner wanted to respond to it, they could make a claim about the claim. So that's kind of my thinking there. And so you're getting the data on the blockchain. You're allowing the things that change frequently, like products, to change. That's part of the mutable data. However, there's an append only, history there on the blockchain that links to IPFS content, and now you can make sort of claims on claims, and ultimately, in terms of a UI, the thing that's really driving my imagination here is I keep going back to Craigslist. And it's a little more cumbersome today because they have more CAPTCHAs and stuff to prove. But it used to be just take a picture, add a title and a price, and you're done. And so I'm trying to get to how could we build an app that's that simple? Like you just take a picture, a title, a price, and you're done. Everything else is beyond that is optional. But then, we really got to worry about not safe for work stuff. We got to have some ability as a community to police the content, or not police, but moderate the content. So it's like, hey, if 5 people have marked this thing as not safe for work, it's probably not safe for work. And they had to pay something, even if it was a penny, to make that claim, then yeah, it's probably not safe for work. But it allows sort of the website that's serving the content can make those decisions, and people can choose which site they're going to go to consume the content. So it makes this sort of moderation as a service. This is a concept that I find I've been following. I find rather fascinating, is sort of this very gray line between censorship and moderation. And censorship as something that somebody does to you that's out of your control, versus moderation that's more like a service that you pay for, and if you don't like how someone's moderating it, you can choose another moderator. So a lot of these sort of squishy ideas, trying to get them into an actual quantitative protocol on the blockchain. So these are just sort of some of my ideas. And then I threw in here, for people who aren't familiar with it, there's this JSON LD, or linked data, and and probably the most popular implementation of it is schema.org. And this is particularly focused on stores and products, and being able to categorize, having standardized ways to describe stores and products and their interaction, so that computers can sort of on the fly figure out, get context and be like, oh, this data is a product, this data is a store, this data is a user. The user left a review about this product for this store. And so like the computer can just reason about those things. You don't have to explicitly tell it these things. You can kind of just figure it out on the fly. That's the whole idea behind schema.org and JSON linked data. And this was originally the original conception of Web3. When Tim Berners-Lee, about 2 decades ago, he came up with the semantic web. That was supposed to be Web3. And then the Ethereum created a library called Web3. And that's what everybody started calling Web3. And so now this is why the VCs are having such a hard time explaining Web3, because the original conception was a semantic web. The more recent conception was, blockchain, Ethereum based. And then you have this IPFS, which is, so everything's kind of a jumble right now, but it's just kind of poetic how we're kind of coming back around to the original conception. But anyways, those are just some ideas. This is something I'm kind of cranking on in the background as I try and work through the deck stuff and meet our obligations with that. This is like the next big thing I really want to focus on. And the more I think about it, like the clearer these ideas, like the indexer, that's a little bit of work, but I already built one, so it's not that big of a deal to fork it and build a new indexer. The schema.org stuff's all there. All we really need to do is just adopt it. And then it really just leaves stores and claims. Those are really like the only two things that really need to be figured out here.
So a proof would be like, a claim would be like somebody would get maybe like a token to actually be able to make a claim on a web.
Yeah, so the idea there is like a claim is very similar to a token, except that if it is a token, like what do you do with the token afterwards? Like that's kind of like, I don't really know. And so what you're really trying to do is get the data on the blockchain so that it's immutable and publicly available. Like that's why it's kind of a bad idea to turn it into a token, because as a token, it doesn't really, I can't see any utility there for it. Wow. What you really need is to be able to put the data somewhere so it's immutable and censorship resistant, and so that the indexer can pick up on it.
Or like a message, like a memo message with the specification.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, just like a memo.cache entry. Yeah, it really could be that simple. And it doesn't need to involve the PSF token at all. I was just thinking like we could add an additional constraint where like the claim has to come from the burning of some quantity of PSF tokens, and that would be a way for us to increase our cash flow if the system took off to pay for infrastructure. So yeah, just ideas at this point, just throwing them out there, brainstorming.
I like the idea of the decentralized Craigslist. I always have. I think all these things we've been talking about or working on are kind of seeming to come together in a way that's going to be cohesive for all of them.
Yeah, thanks. The other inspiration here is that I did before I got into the Bitcoin Cash space, like before Bitcoin Cash existed, I spent about a year there during 2017 doing a lot of work with the Open Bazaar guys. And so I got a very upfront, close, intimate view of what they did that worked really well and what they did that was not working well. And I think one of the things that at that time, Bitcoin was becoming way too expensive to write a bunch of data on the chain. That's why they didn't do it that way. They took a fork of IPFS and they created like a private IPFS network essentially. And that didn't work very well because there was all these issues with latency and availability. So they're a lot of these issues that we're going to deal with. And so this is why, but with Bitcoin Cash and the ability to write cheaply to the chain, that changes the economics. And it also, because it's on the blockchain, now you don't have the availability issues that you would have with IPFS, because it's just on the blockchain. You just look it up. And I think originally that's that might have been the first decision that led to OpenBazaar's demise, was the decision to stick with Bitcoin and therefore prevent themselves from being able to just put data on the chain. And so, yeah, lots of thoughts there, lots of trade-offs.
That probably led to Mike Hearn's rage quit and everything else, because they couldn't scale up. I mean, there's a lot of things that happened after that put us in this spot. So, yeah.
But yeah, I think this is a use case where our hybrid approach of the bulk of the content goes on IPFS, but you use like pointers on the blockchain to sort of organize everything. So it's small and efficient. You're using the blockchain efficiently, but also a big key part of that is having low transaction fees. So I think that's kind of the sweet spot. I'll just open it up if anybody wants to talk about anything else before we wrap this up. Go for it.
This would be a good time for Stoyan Magic if he wants to.
Oh, these weeks were a little tough. I was pretty much working on daily job. So yeah, but no, there's a lot of interesting stuff going around. It's just like, I know, too much.
Yeah.
If we start talking now, it will take hours, and yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like in these bear markets, it's there's so much building going on that it's almost harder to follow, because during the bull markets you're trying, at least I'm trying to like not be distracted by all the hoopla and just keep building. But now everybody's building because there's nothing else to do.
Yeah, I hear interesting like clarification that there's the two, like now when we are not in the bull market, we're in build market.
Yeah.
So there's no bear market, it's build market. So yeah.
I like that. That's a great way to say it, actually, because it's true, but also it's really never been defined that way. So that's a great way to say it.
Yeah, I've been playing with WebAssembly. So this was, I think maybe a month ago, I was having a hard time trying to figure out how to use I guess Node modules on the front end. So you have to do this like browserify thing, and basically I was trying to figure out how to use a mnemonic library, and I kept running into basically I found this I found it easier to use WebAssembly than doing the whole common JS to, and I guess the whole JavaScript, like the module system was like, there's like this whole thing where you have to there's ESM. I guess the module system is kind of weird.
Common JS and ESM.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. How's that? I've never really dipped my toe into the WASM waters. Like, what? How's that workflow work? So you can write. You're saying you're writing something in Node.js, compiling it to WASM, and then you can access it in the browser.
Well, basically, you can use assembly script and Rust and Go and then you can compile those modules using to WebAssembly, which is then WebAssembly module is converted, I think, to just JavaScript. So I got a mnemonic. Just I wanted to see if I could just use a library just to make I'm learning the whole process of how you get a mnemonic to a seed and then all that stuff. And I found the WebAssembly workflow just to be a little simpler than going from common JS to ESM. And
yeah, this WebAssembly is like very, very hot topic. I think most of the recent world's nice projects are based on something named Cosm Awesome, which is like, how to see, the initial Cosmos, these atom-based blockchains, they have a very nice like underlying structure, but they separated the consensus in the state. So you have like a pretty, how to see, basic layer which will, how to see, propagate all the transactions, but you can put every state on top of this. So it can be, you can propagate, for example, the state of the traffic lights. Is it red light or something? So you can have this kind of custom application on top, and you can use the underlying structure. But it was like nothing, it was too basic. So they pretty much created this CosmAsm project, which allow you, like some mentioned, in some programming language, which is pretty much Rust or Go or a script, I think, assembler script, something. So you create this bulb in this format, and you can put it on the blockchain. And it's the nice thing is that it's a standard format. So you can have many blockchains. So you can create them for many blockchains. So all of the Cosmos blockchain, like including our friend Terra, Luna, and like Near protocol also, they does not use Cosmos, but their whole system is based on this CosmWasm, like WebAssembler. So it's very exciting topic, because in the usual EVMs, when you create some blob, like some you compile something, it's in some format. You don't know what is inside. Like there's some format, but it's not very standard. But this like CosmWasm, it standardized everything. So when you create some of this stuff, you can easily have other blockchains created very easy. That's why they have a lot of them. Like Juno, my friend's beloved friend Juno, part of it. Recently, thing that I love is Evmos, if you know them. EVMOS. You can see there the only token which is pumping the last 2 weeks. It's like green every day. It was on the, I think, half of the dollar, and now it's like $3 already during this bear market. So yeah, they have an interesting concept. When you create account, you have 2 addresses. One is in the Cosmos ecosystem, one is the Ethereum. So you can exchange tokens between this stuff without any DEX or without any bridges or everything. You just send token to some EVM address, and it's like this on the Cosmos blockchains. So yeah, interesting stuff. All of this new beautiful word is using WebAssembly. So yeah, Sam is on the right track.
One of the things I've seen was about WebAssembly is that it's supposed to be really performant. So somebody was able to like run an entire operating system in the browser, and then they had, I forgot which one, I think it was Windows 95 running inside the browser, and then they had like Netscape, and then Netscape was running Chrome, and it was weird. It was like this crazy like stuff that's really supposed you're not supposed to be able to run something like that. But you can play now. You can play like 3D like Doom, like high performance games in the browser.
So yeah, I'm a little conflicted on WebAssembly and web components. So I can't really tell this without going back to the history. So there was Tim Berners-Lee started the W3C, which is like the standards body for creating web standards, and that's how we got HTML and XML and just a lot of the base technologies. But then once Microsoft got into the game, and then Google, these like behemoths, they were so big that they were able to be like, if they liked the standard, then it was fine. But if they didn't like the standard, they just wouldn't implement it. And then, they just had way too much influence in that they could just veto a standard. And so it really changed.
Yeah, it was the era of the buttons. Design it for Explorer, design it for Netscape. I have a lot of this on my web pages.
Yeah. So then there was Facebook, and they created React, and React just like, has dominated. I mean, as you compare to like Vue or Angular, like, yeah, they exist, but React has way more market share. And so then the W3C created web components, which is like, that's what React introduced. It was this idea of like, let's make everything a component, all these Lego blocks. That's what a web app is. You're just putting all these components together. And so the W3C came up with web components, and a lot of people were like, oh, this is going to change everything. We don't need React anymore because it's like conceptual thing is like natively baked into a browser, but it never went anywhere. Like every once in a while I hear somebody talk about web components, and it's like nobody uses it. Everybody still uses React. And then WebAssembly is like similar. It's like they came up with this really nice standard, and everybody liked it, and it was great. Except like I just haven't seen the adoption. You get these pockets, and where I've seen WebAssembly really get popular is non-JavaScript programming languages, because they need some way to write code in Go or Rust and then have it run in the web browser, and WebAssembly is apparently the way to do it. But I don't know if WebAssembly is going to be like web components, or if it's actually going to take off. And right now, I don't know. I see a lot of growth in these little niches, but I don't see like really wide adoption yet of WebAssembly.
I told you, all Cosmos block system is using it.
Well, there you go.
It's pretty wild. But you can think about it like, how to see. It's the same like Java. You don't compile directly to binary code. You first create some like something in the middle. All programming languages have its name like P code or something. So you create some kind of pseudo, very simple assembler, and it's then compiled to binary code. So WASM is just this one. There's nothing to do with the browsers or with whatever. This browser is just one environment where this can be run, but it's pretty much like bytecode in some specific format, which allows like this high performance computations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's probably a better way to look at it.
Yeah, here is one link if you want to take a look.
Okay, guys. Well, we're getting close to an hour and a half. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. It's been a good meeting. Really like seeing what you guys were all doing. I want to do more of that. If you guys are doing stuff you're excited about, I want to open this up as a platform for you guys to show and tell. So thank you, Aaron, for demoing your exchange.
That's very awesome, Aaron.
Yeah, thanks. I'm excited about. I love the fact that the technology to interact with the blockchain is built in. The PSF's handling that stuff, because that's the stuff I would not be able to do, and I would have spent forever just getting to that spot. So, thanks to the PSF and all of you for making that possible, and everyone who's funded throughout.
Can I just mention something? I think with Aaron, we will try on Friday to do multi-sig stuff with PSF wallet. So do you have some advice, Chris, where we can go to do this stuff?
Yeah, it's pretty rough. That's pretty ambitious. But really there's those two, there's that fork of PSF Cli wallet. It has two commands. One was intended to be run by all participants, and one is run by the aggregator. And so I would say just study those commands. The multi-sig is super rough, because like ideally what you would do is each person would just sign a message, but I couldn't figure out how to do it that way. So I have them actually just put their private key in an encrypted message that they then send to the aggregator. And so the aggregator has all the private keys, and then they're able to do the transaction, which is like kind of an ass backwards way to do it. But it's okay, because it does, part of that process is key rotation. So everybody ends up with a new private key that only they have at the end of this whole thing. So it's not ideal. It's a struggle, because I'm trying to combine Bitcore with BCHJS they're both forked from the original from an original project, but they both like evolved significantly differently. And so because I'm trying to do an SLP transaction, a multi-sig SLP transaction, I'm using BCHJS to create a transaction with only an operturn, because Bitcore will not work with SLP tokens. And so I have this it's a partial transaction. It just has one output, which is an operturn. I pass that into Bitcore, and then Bitcore adds the pay to script hash multi-sig inputs and outputs. And then I think I broadcast it with BCHJS. So it's not there. I mean, like there's a lot of problems with it. It's like a proof of concept. It barely works. But yeah, I'd love to have more eyeballs on it, but don't expect to be impressed.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not sure. Maybe Aaron is still up to the idea to try it.
I'll try anything.
Okay.
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 I think you said you had some work thing on Saturday, and I'm getting back from vacation tomorrow. So
okay. Yeah, no, this week was your vacation week. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, next week. So okay, it's great. We have more time to just see what is inside.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, that code though is like our whole minting council is going to be, it's either going to exist or not exist based on that code. So I would love to have you take a look at it, Stoyan. And, we can push forward with the code as it is, but it would just be way better if people didn't actually have to send their private keys to the aggregator, if they could actually just sign a message. And that should be possible with the Bitcore code. It's just going to require somebody to sit down and figure that part out. And so if anybody wants to do that, I'm sure we could throw a few PSF coins your way. But yeah, that's really, if we could get that part done, the whole workflow would just be way better. But even if we don't have it, we can still do the minting council.
You can mint with CashScript, but that's a whole other thing itself. I've been playing with CashScript a little bit. I made this little I was playing with this app where it creates 3 hashes and then you set some conditions. And it's been it's interesting to play with. It's really like, it's really cool, basically, like when you see the P2SH script and all the types of conditions you can set.
So you said that you can mint an SLP token with CashScript?
If you go to the docs, there is a minting. You could set a condition, whatever you want, whatever that condition. You can set, time locks, or these many addresses, but there is a mint of, I know there's a SLP output option as a when you want to spend from the contract, or you want to broadcast, there is, I think, an SLP option there.
Well, that would be a whole nother avenue to explore, because Roscoe created CashScript. We both work together at Bitcoin.com, and so BCHJS is based on Bitbox, which CashScript was also originally based on Bitbox. And so I believe that CashScript works with BCHJS.
Oh yeah, it uses full stack as a. It uses it for broadcasting, I think. When it broadcasts, you can use either.
It have something named adapters, and you can have adapters to different stacks. Yeah. And I think full cache is one of them. It's from the beginning there, I think.
Well, yeah, that would be a much cleaner way to do it, because all I'm using Bitcore for is to create the pay to script hash multi-sig stuff. So CashScript has all that. And so I just the Bitcore had these really nice examples I was able to hack on, so that's why I went with that route. But CashScript would be a much more better native, and I need to look into that. I'd love for us to collectively look into that. I'm probably not going to get time to look into it, but
I'm not sure if it's needed, because it's just high level language, but it's finally compiled to these opcodes which are put inside the UTXO. And for our case, it's pretty simple. You just put, if you remember, we was talking before, it's a very simple format, web 0, something, something, something. So you don't need maybe cache script for all of this. You just put there the signatures and this is all.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to have a transaction that has the pay to script hash code for multisig, and then has the first output as an op return that follows the SLP spec. And that's like there's those two components, the pay to script hash and the op return. Like you got to put those together in the same transaction. That's the hard part. That's why I ended up having to like kludge together different parts of Bitcore and BCH.js. So if we could replace the Bitcore portion with cache script or just a template, that's really all we need is just this op return or the script template is what we need. And so that could either come from Bitcore or cache script, or we could write our own. So there's a lot of room for refinement there. And this is what I'm like. So this is why I'm excited. If we even if we have this like sort of really shitty hacky code that at least gets us to the point where we can have a minting council, and then the minting council is meeting every 3 months to set the price of the PSF token, and manage some of our other infrastructure, then we got the ball rolling, and we can always improve and iterate from there. Yeah, probably a good spot to wrap it up, guys. Really appreciate you making time. Loved hearing your ideas and getting your input today.
Thanks, everybody.